Remember all those stories, we used to hear as kids about, like, far-off places and strange happenings? Well, get ready for one that hits a little closer to home, and it might just send a shiver down your spine. It's a story about a place not too far from home, tucked away in the French countryside, where whispers of something truly unsettling took root.
You know what's captivating about this story is how quickly a seemingly ordinary town can become the epicenter of a national nightmare, fueled by fear and whispers that spread like wildfire.
You're absolutely right. Picture this. It's 1870 rural France. The Franco-Prussian War is raging, casting a long shadow of fear and suspicion across the nation. And amidst this backdrop, we find the small town of Ottoy, known for its lively fairs. But the annual summer fair of 1870 took a horrifying turn, etching itself into history for all the wrong reasons. A young nobleman, Alain de Montaigne, met a gruesome end, right there amidst the supposed merriment.
And the most shocking detail that gripped the nation, the accusation of cannibalism against the villagers. Newspapers spun tales of barbaric rituals and a community that had descended into savagery. The alleged words of the mayor, "Eat him, if you like," echoed through the corridors of public opinion, branding Ofte with a mark of infamy.
It's a chilling thought, almost too horrific to believe. But was Ofte truly a town of cannibals? Or is there more to this story, something more complex, lurking beneath the surface of those sensational headlines? That's exactly what we're here to uncover.
To truly grasp the gravity of what transpired in Ofte, we need to immerse ourselves in the context of that era. France, as we mentioned, was embroiled in a war with Prussia, and a series of defeats had shaken the nation to its core. Imagine the fear and paranoia that permeated everyday life, the suspicion that any stranger could be an enemy in disguise.
So people were on edge, to say the least. It's like that feeling you get after watching a scary movie, when every creak in your house suddenly seems ominous.
Precisely. And to compound this pervasive anxiety, a severe drought had gripped the region. Failed crops and looming famine added another layer of desperation, making the social fabric even more fragile. In a time when survival itself felt precarious, tensions simmered just beneath the surface, ready to boil over.
We're talking about a perfect storm of anxieties then: war rumors, economic hardship. And into this volatile mix steps Alain de Montaigne, a respected nobleman, arriving at the Ofte Fair. What was he doing there? Was he just there for the festivities?
Not exactly. You see, Elaine wasn't supposed to be the target. He was there to defend his cousin Camille de Maillard, who had been accused of treason against Emperor Napoleon III.
Treason. Now that's serious. What did this Camille do? Publicly denounce the emperor's policies.
Well, the accounts are a bit murky. Some witnesses claimed they overheard Camille criticizing Napoleon III and speaking favorably of Prussian victories. But remember, in this climate of suspicion, even a whisper of dissent could be misconstrued as a threat to national security.
So was Camille actually a traitor? Or was he just caught up in the frenzy of wartime paranoia? Was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, expressing an opinion that was deemed dangerous?
That remains a point of debate. What we do know is that Elaine's attempt to defend his cousin, a seemingly noble act, only served to further inflame the already agitated crowd. They saw him as an accomplice, another threat to their fragile sense of security.
So how did this escalate, from accusations and heated words to outright violence? There's a huge leap between verbal disagreement and a brutal murder.
That's where the chilling power of mob mentality comes into play. It's a dark side of human behavior that emerges when fear, anger, and anonymity converge. In a crowd, individuals can lose their sense of self, their moral compass, becoming swept up in the collective rage.
It's like the old saying, two heads are better than one, gone terribly wrong. Instead of reasoned thought, you get a kind of collective hysteria, where no one wants to be the voice of dissent.
Exactly. And in Ofte, that spark of accusation against Elaine landed on a tinderbox of anxieties. Rumors fueled by wartime paranoia and economic desperation created an environment where any perceived threat could ignite a firestorm of violence.
So this mob mentality, is that why no one stepped in to stop the violence? Were they all simply caught up in the moment, unable to think or act independently?
In a mob, individuals lose their sense of responsibility, their inhibitions. They become faceless actors in a collective drama, often doing things they would never do on their own. Think about it. In a normal setting, would any of these people have condoned such brutality?
It's like each person becomes a cog in a machine,
Yeah.
driven by forces they can't control, their individual conscience muted by the overwhelming power of the crowd.
Yes. And the specific details of how the crowd transformed in Ofte are chilling. It started with verbal abuse, insults hurled at Elaine and his cousin. Then came the shoves, the punches, the stones thrown from a distance.
So it wasn't a sudden explosive attack, but rather a slow, agonizing escalation of violence, almost like a ritualistic sacrifice.
That's a powerful way to put it, and tragically accurate. Witness accounts describe a scene of unimaginable brutality. Elaine was dragged through the town, beaten, tortured. Even his pleas for mercy were met with further cruelty. Imagine the terror he must have felt, the desperate hope that someone, anyone, would intervene. But the mob had become a force unto itself, deaf to reason or compassion.
It's hard to fathom how seemingly ordinary people, farmers, shopkeepers, could participate in such barbarity. It speaks to the power of the situation, the way fear and groupthink can override our basic human decency.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the question that has haunted Oftay for centuries. How did a brutal lynching morph into accusations of cannibalism? It's a leap that seems almost too horrific to comprehend.
It does seem like a whole other level of depravity. Was there any truth to those initial reports? Did the villagers actually consume Elaine's flesh?
While the initial reports of villagers literally eating Elaine's body were sensationalized and ultimately unfounded, there was a symbolic element to their actions that fueled those rumors, a darkness that reflected the primal anxieties of the time.
Symbolic. What do you mean by that?
After Elaine's death, his body was treated with a callous indifference. That mirrored the way villagers might butcher livestock. They poked his abdomen, commented on the fat dripping from his burning body. It was a way of stripping him of his humanity, turning him into something less than human, an object rather than a person.
I see. So while they didn't literally consume him, their actions reflected a kind of symbolic cannibalism, a way of erasing his individual identity and asserting dominance over the other.
Precisely. And in the context of wartime anxieties, where the line between us and them had become blurred, it's easy to see how those actions combined with the swirling rumors solidified the narrative of Oftay as a cannibal town.
It's a chilling example of how quickly fear and misinformation can warp our perceptions,
Yeah.
turning neighbors into monsters in the blink of an eye. And sadly, this distortion of truth wasn't confined to the whispers and rumors spreading through the countryside.
You're right to point out the role of the media in shaping public perception. The Oftay case became a national sensation, with newspapers across France seizing upon the story and amplifying the most gruesome details.
So it wasn't just about reporting the facts, it was about selling papers,
Mm-hmm.
playing into existing prejudices, and maybe even pushing certain political agendas.
Exactly. The image of a cannibal town tapped into deep-seated anxieties about rural communities, about the perceived savagery of the lower classes. It was a convenient narrative for those in power, a way to reinforce the existing social hierarchy and quell any potential for unrest.
It's like a 19th century version of fake news going viral, shaping public opinion and influencing how people viewed the world around them.
That's a striking analogy, and it underscores how the manipulation of information, whether through sensationalized headlines or outright fabrications, has been a tool of social control for centuries.
It makes you wonder, how much of what we believe about the past, about other cultures, is based on distorted narratives that served someone's agenda? It's a cautionary tale for our own time, when information flows so freely. But its accuracy can be so easily manipulated.
It's a powerful point. The Oftay case serves as a stark reminder that we should always approach information with a critical eye, questioning the source, considering the motives of those who are shaping the narrative.
So what happened in the aftermath of the lynching? Did anyone face justice for Elaine's murder? Was Oftay held accountable for the actions of its mob?
Yes, but whether it was true justice or a form of scapegoating is debatable. Swift trials were held and harsh sentences were handed down. 4 men were executed, others imprisoned, and the town itself was ostracized, becoming a pariah in the national consciousness.
Wow. Sounds like the authorities wanted to make an example of them, to send a message that such acts wouldn't be tolerated. But was it truly about justice for Elaine? Or was it about quelling fears of further unrest?
That's the question, isn't it? Was it about punishing those responsible or about reasserting control? Demonstrating the power of the state to those who dared challenge the established order. Some argue that the swiftness and severity of the punishment reflected a deeper anxiety among the ruling class, a fear of the mob, of the potential for chaos and revolution that simmered beneath the surface of French society.
It's fascinating and a bit unsettling to see how a single event, as horrific as it was, could become a catalyst for broader social anxieties and political maneuvering. But what about Oftay itself? How did the town cope with the aftermath of the lynching, with the stain of that day on its history?
Despite attempts at reconciliation and remembrance, the shadow of that one summer day continues to shape the town's identity. It's a legacy that is both tragic and complex, a reminder of the enduring power of narratives to define a place and its people for generations to come.
It's almost like the town itself became a prisoner of its past, forever linked to this act of barbarity, despite any efforts to move forward.
That's a poignant way to put it. Imagine living in Ofte, knowing that your town is synonymous with this horrific event. It's a heavy burden to carry, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary communities.
Have there been any efforts to reclaim Oftay's history? To tell a more nuanced story beyond the cannibal town label? To acknowledge the tragedy while also recognizing the complex factors that led to it?
There have been attempts, for instance, on the 100th anniversary of the murder. The Ofte Church organized a ceremony of forgiveness, a symbolic act of reconciliation that included descendants of both Alain Benaz and some of those who participated in the lynching. It was a powerful moment, an attempt to bridge the chasm of the past and seek a path towards healing.
That's a profound gesture, acknowledging the past while seeking to move forward. But has the town been able to fully shed the weight of that history?
It's an ongoing process. More recent efforts to erect a plaque in remembrance of the lynching, to provide a more balanced historical account, were met with resistance from some residents. It's understandable in a way. It's a painful history, and some might feel that dredging it up will only reopen old wounds.
It makes you wonder how the residents of Oftay today view their town's history. Do they see it as a source of shame? Or do they acknowledge the complexity, the factors that led to that tragic day?
That's a question worth pondering, and it underscores the importance of historical perspective. We can't judge the actions of people in the past solely through the lens of our own values and understanding. We need to immerse ourselves in the context of their time to understand the fears, the prejudices, the prevailing beliefs that shaped their worldview.
Right, we can't simply dismiss them as savages or monsters.
Mhm.
We have to consider the social and political forces that were at play, the ways in which fear and desperation can warp our perceptions and drive us to commit acts that we might otherwise find abhorrent. It doesn't excuse their actions, but it helps us understand how such a horrific event could occur.
Exactly, and in doing so, we might gain valuable insights into the human condition, the factors that can lead to violence, prejudice, and the distortion of truth, because those factors aren't confined to the past, are they? We see them play out today in different forms, but with the same potential for harm.
You're right, the Oftay case, while rooted in a specific time and place, holds universal lessons about the dangers of misinformation, mob mentality, and the exploitation of fear. These are forces that continue to shape our world, influencing how we perceive events, how we treat each other, and how we make decisions that impact our lives and communities.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most important lesson we can glean from Ofte is the importance of critical thinking. We can't simply accept everything we hear or read at face value, especially in this age of instant information and social media echo chambers.
Yeah, it's so easy to get swept up in the outrage or the fear, to jump to conclusions without considering all sides of the story, without questioning the sources of information that are shaping our perceptions.
Precisely. The Ofte case reminds us to pause, to take a step back, to question our assumptions, and to seek out diverse perspectives, to be discerning consumers of information, not passive recipients of whatever narrative is being pushed, to remember that behind every headline, every shocking story, there are human beings with complex motivations and experiences.
And to recognize that those human beings, even those who commit horrific acts, are not so different from ourselves, that given the right circumstances, any one of us could be susceptible to the same forces that drove the mob in Oftay.
That's a powerful and sobering thought. And it leads us to the question, what can we as individuals learn from Ofte? How can we apply these lessons to our own lives and the world around us?
It's a question that deserves careful consideration. We can't undo the past, but we can learn from it. We can strive to be more discerning consumers of information, more critical thinkers, more aware of the forces that can shape our perceptions and influence our actions. We can choose empathy over fear, understanding over judgment.
Well said. It's a challenge, no doubt, but one that is essential if we are to create a more just and compassionate world. A world where the tragedy of Ofte serves not as a blueprint for future horrors, but as a stark reminder of the path we must never tread again.
But before we wrap up this deep dive into the dark heart of Oftay, I want to encourage our listeners to explore this story further, to delve into the historical context, the individual narratives, and the lingering questions that continue to fascinate and challenge us.
Absolutely. For those who want to learn more about the Ofte case, I highly recommend Elaine Corvin's book, The Village of Cannibals. It's a meticulously researched and thought-provoking account that delves into the social, political, and psychological factors that contributed to this horrific event.
It's a challenging read, no doubt,
Yeah.
but one that offers a nuanced perspective on a story that has often been reduced to sensational headlines and simplistic explanations.
Oh.
It reminds us that history is not just about dates and facts, but about human stories, the choices we make, and the consequences that ripple through time, shaping the world we live in today.
And perhaps, in understanding the complexities of the past and grappling with the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary communities, we can find the wisdom and the courage to build a better future. A future where such tragedies are relegated to the history books, serving as cautionary tales rather than blueprints for repeating the mistakes of our ancestors.
Well said. I think this deep dive has given us all a lot to think about. It's a story that challenges our assumptions, compels us to question the narratives we've been told,
Yeah.
and reminds us of the fragility of civilization, the thin veneer that separates order from chaos.
It's also a story that reminds us of our shared humanity, the potential for both good and evil that resides within each of us. It's a call to be vigilant, to cultivate empathy and critical thinking, to resist the lure of easy answers and simplistic explanations.
And to remember that the choices we make, the stories we tell, and the actions we take all have the power to shape the world around us for better or for worse. The legacy of Ottoy, a tale whispered across generations, serves as a stark reminder of the responsibility we all bear to create a world where fear and ignorance no longer hold sway, where truth and compassion illuminate the path forward.
To our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to dig deeper into the stories that shape our world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
And remember, the past is never truly past. It lives within us, shaping who we are and who we might become. By understanding its lessons, we can choose to write a different story for ourselves. A story of hope, understanding, and a shared commitment to building a better future.